Coming to you straight from the Rio Grande and beyond. Broadcasting to the four corners of the globe. So grab your seat, your coffee, or your sundowner.
Okay, everybody, here we go.
On point, as always. This is Gloves Off. Gloves Off.
Back at you in Gloves Off. I'm Professor Buitrón, and I'm here with a great friend, one that I consider my brother. And he's an icon of the martial arts in the East Coast, Boston, New Hampshire area. It's Sensei Peter Freedman. How we doing, brother? You doing good?
We're doing good. Glad to hear from you. Glad to be here today. It's a nice day out here in New Hampshire. The weather's good for once. That's nice.
Absolutely. Here it's raining. You know, Laredo weather. It's usually hot.
Yep.
It's boiling, so it's just a matter of time.
It's always hot there. It was hot when I was there.
Absolutely. And, you know, it's some good times. But how are you doing? How's your family? Is everybody well?
Everybody's well. I got two daughters. I have one daughter that was married to Everett, my son-in-law. I absolutely love him. My wife loves him. And we started working out every Monday. He comes over and we started pumping iron. I started taking more vitamins, minerals, calcium, magnesium, vitamin D, zinc, things like that to increase my bone density. So the weights will also help out. My oldest daughter that got married is doing really well. She got her master's at college, and she does online marketing stuff. So in the future, she's going to help me market my martial art Zoom classes and books that I'm going to be making in the future, and I'm working on right now. My youngest daughter got her master's, and she's a school teacher. She teaches second grade, and the school's right around the corner. She gets in her Jeep, drives to school every morning. She's out of here by 7:15 a.m. in the morning, doesn't get home till 6 o'clock at night. Imagine that. And my wife just started a new job as a dental assistant, and she loves it. And she works 5 days a week. And then weekends, she has a weekend job at the supermarket. And then I'm making training tomahawks and out of plastic, and training blades and things like that. And I'm running classes a couple of days a week. And then I'm doing my Zoom class every Sunday. But we may be expanding that to a Wednesday night Arnis class. So things are, they're doing pretty well here. We're going good.
Absolutely. You know, as you know, last year we had the pandemic, and people are still with it, and it has frightened everybody left and right. You know, so you do have some Zoom classes. You got people doing stuff like that, and I've seen a lot of our friends in the martial arts that have lost their schools. Yeah. Right now, we're trying to kind of make sure that we kind of hung on last year. So right now it's moving forward. My wife's classes with Capoeira are doing well. Savat is picking up, even though Savat lost some schools throughout the pandemic. We lost Chicago. We lost some of the other ones that we had out there, Denver area. We lost a bunch of different areas that we had. But there's still 2 schools left. So we're trying to pick those up. You know, we got some of those teaching abroad that are doing well. They're starting to pick up, you know, Mexico with Elena, if you well know her. She's doing well. She's picking up her classes again. So it's changing. You know what I'm seeing now more with the martial arts? People that really want to learn.
Yeah.
Before you used to have a lot of the people that were doing fads.
Yeah.
They wanted to go in there because it was a fad, because they saw a movie. They wanted their kid to become a black belt at 7 years old, because down the street, all their friends were black belts at the local chop and block school. So all of a sudden, it was just like a fad. Now you're getting people that really want to learn. I think reality has snuck into people.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing more people now being more prepared, understanding the reasoning for learning self-defense. Because as well as you know, Peter, is when the fight comes and it's right in front of you, and I want to talk about this, that's all the training you've got.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So talk
I,
about
see, I grew up fighting my whole life. My father was, I told you before, was a pro boxer in the ring, and he was a bare knuckle boxer outside of the ring, and he was a champion in both. And he got out of boxing because of, it was run by the mob back then, and they paid him to take a dive, and he wouldn't do it. As a matter of fact, he punished the other fighter for a few rounds and then knocked him out. And after that, they decided they were going to kill him. So my father knew some people that actually talked to those people, and my father gave up boxing and started training boxers. So back then, being Jewish was kind of rough. A lot of people hated Jews. So he was fighting all the time. As a matter of fact, in order to get a job, he lied and changed his name to Murphy. And they made him foreman because they thought he was Irish. But he taught me how to fight when I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. The first thing I learned how to do was throw hands. For 1 year, all I did was footwork and throw a jab. That's it. He wouldn't let me throw a right cross, a hook, or an uppercut. It was just footwork and a jab. And he said the jab is the most important thing because the jab teaches you distance. It lets you feel distance. The jab sets up your opponent for all your other shots. Your jab keeps your opponent away from you. And he was showing me how to redirect with the jab, how to intercept with the jab by using the top of your forearm or the bottom of your forearm to over punch on top of a guy's punch, or under punch under a guy's punch, bumping his punch with your forearm as you hit him. So then the first thing I learned was boxing. And then from there, I got into some street fights, came back with my hands were bruised up and my eyes were bruised. And my father said, I'm going to show you a different kind of boxing. So then he started having me harden my hands, squeeze wax, walk around with wax in my hand, use a handball to squeeze. And then he would have me put an elastic on the outside of my fingers. So I'd have to open my hand to strengthen my fingers with the elastic, because he said that's very important. And then, of course, we did the basic stick with the rope and the weight, and you roll it up and down. And then he had me hitting a bag without gloves, but tapping it until my skin got thicker. And after I learned that, and I got into a few street fights with that, that helped out a lot because my hands were harder and I could hit harder. And I was not a violent person, but he pretty much said, you have to learn to fight. And I asked him why. It's because you're Jewish and people are going to, want to beat you up because of your ethnicity and stuff. And I can get by, when you hang out with certain people who are the same race as you, meaning white skin, but they don't know your ethnicity, and then hear a lot of anti-Semitism, and these people are supposed to be your friends and they're talking shit about Jews. I got into a lot of fights. So I told my dad I wanted to learn, like how to kick. And he didn't. So he said, all right. So he showed me how to kick people in the shin, how to step on people's toes, how to use my knees. I said, no, I want to do karate. So we went around to different karate schools, and that was pretty much after I kind of got shipped up to North Reading to live with my brother, because I was in the heart of Boston, and I was getting into fights and trouble, and people were looking for me. So he says, I'm shipping you up to live with your brother. So when I went to live with my brother and his wife, there was a karate class. Ron Martin was the sensei there, and he taught Goju-Ryu karate. And he was like a world kumite champion. I didn't know that. I didn't even know what kumite was. So my sister-in-law signed me up for Goju-Ryu classes at the YMCA. I think it was in Lawrence. And I started learning karate there, fell in love with it. I loved the kicks. I loved, how they use their elbows and knees and all the low stances to build up your leg muscles. And then over time, I got into trouble in North Reading after a couple of years living there, and I had to go live back in Boston with my father and mother again. And I told my father, I really enjoyed the karate and I got the boxing now, but I want to go back and learn more karate. So he took me around to all these different martial arts schools. We'd sit there, watch a class. He'd lean over, whisper in my ear, this is crap. And then he'd get up, he goes, come on, we're leaving. And then I think in 1970 or 71, he took me to the Academy of Ketsugu. And in that school, they did judo, aikido, karate, jujitsu, savate, and something else. Now, the savate was taught by a French Foreign Legion, who was he was a French Jew who taught the Ketsugu Jiu-Jitsu teachers savate, and they would kick with the point of their shoe. They wouldn't use the ball. Well, sometimes they'd use the ball, but everything was with the point of the shoe. So
Sure.
my first experience to savate, I hated it because he tied my hands up behind my back. I wasn't allowed to use my hands. And he had 3 guys attack me with boxing gloves on, and they're punching me in the face. And he said, just use your feet only. And he showed us the crescent kick, how to do that swooping side kick where you pick your leg up in like a circle and you kick out. And so we were doing all kinds of things like that. He got me into the judo. I competed in judo. But my father took me to that class. We watched the Ketsugu Jiu-Jitsu, and they had a small Asian lady, Chinese lady, came out, and she demonstrated against 3 big guys. And I mean, these guys went after her, and it wasn't prearranged. It wasn't fake. They were really hitting her. They split her lip open, and she threw these guys all over the place. And my father leaned over and he says, this is where you're coming. We're going to sign you up here. So he went into the office privately, met with the Bob Dickey, who was the sensei, and had a conversation with him. Didn't know what he said, but when the sensei came out, he just grinned at me and he told my father, don't worry, we'll straighten him out. So I know I kind of get an idea what happened. So when he left, I started taking classes, and the sensei, for some reason, I didn't think liked me, because he'd either kick me in the nuts or he'd slap me in the face out of nowhere. Or sometimes he'd walk by me and grab the back of my collar and flip me. And years later, many, many years later, I lost touch with that sensei, but one of his students contacted me and said, if he wanted to get further in the art of Ketsugu, to contact Peter Freedman in New Hampshire. So he contacted me and he said that he told him the whole story. He remembered when my father brought me in there for my classes to sign up in jiu-jitsu. And he told him that my father told him that I was a troubled kid and he needed to be straightened out. That's what the conversation was. So really the instructor didn't hate me. It's just that he was trying to straighten me out. I didn't realize I was a rough kid. So I was getting into fights all the time, either with kids that weren't, I was getting into fights with kids that were white kids, Caucasians, but they didn't like Jews. And then I found out what my father meant by being a Jew. So I was fighting because I was Jewish. And then I'd go into certain neighborhoods and get into fights because I was white. I was the wrong color. So I was fighting everybody. So a lot of the kids that I hung out with became my brothers. And that's when it's like you get a certain group of friends and they don't give a shit about your color or ethnicity. And that's what I love. And that's why I like living in the South End of Boston, not South Boston. The South End is different. It was a melting pot for all different races, ethnicities, and everybody stood up for everybody. We were a neighborhood, we were a family. So that's why I love living in the South End. And then it started changing as the money started coming in. Rich people were coming in, they were kicking the poor people out. And eventually we had to get out of there. So couldn't afford anything in Boston, moved up here to New Hampshire. And wow, the people are very different up here. There's no fear up here when I moved up here because everybody has a gun and everybody goes in their backyard and practices. So the crime there's hardly crime up here. So you try to teach a real martial art, nobody really cares to learn it because, because there's hardly any crime. So I ended up getting more like business owners who wanted to learn how to protect themselves going to the bank, or, when they had large sums of cash. So
Sure.
I started training people that own gun stores, training people that own restaurants, training people that own their own bars and pubs. And I was training the owners of these different places. And through that, I started meeting students. They would send me people and they would become students. And because I was commuting into Boston, which is 80 something miles one way. And then there's a shit ton of traffic on the way going into Boston. And then coming home, it's 80 something miles. And I wouldn't be getting home till midnight. So that got old really quick. And then I found an old karate school up here, Okinawan Karate, and the gentleman let me teach out of his school. And I just had maybe about 4 or 5 students. And then we ended up tearing down my 2-car garage and building a 3-car garage with a 30 by 30 foot room above it with 17-foot cathedral ceilings. We put Japanese lights in there, and I started teaching out of my garage, and I stopped teaching there. And it's really different in New Hampshire because in Boston, your head was on spiral 360. Up here, the only thing you got to worry about is maybe a coyote or a black bear or something. Nobody really bothers you up here. So the violence isn't as bad. That's when I first moved up here. 20 something years later, things are changing. You got a lot of people from other states moving in here, and with them, they bring crime. They bring violence with them. And now the New Hampshire people, in cities like Manchester, New Hampshire, or Nashua, New Hampshire, it's starting to become like Massachusetts with the crime. And that's because you got all these people moving in from different states, and they're bringing their crime and their attitudes with them. It's funny. They come up here because they don't like the state they live in, and it's beautiful up here. And then they come up here, and then they want to change everything, put in sidewalks and put up street lights, just like from where they came from where they hated it, and they're making it like where they came from. It sucks, you know. But how you doing over there?
We're doing fine. You know, like I said, things are changing a little bit different. Like I told you, that we're getting more people that are more serious about learning. And you know the way I teach, I'm not the type that's gonna pat you in the back and here's your belt for money.
Yeah, I know.
You're gonna learn because you're gonna learn, or else,
Yeah,
you know, you're gonna learn. You know,
yeah,
and that's just the way it should be. I was taught that way. You know, I was taught that way by others. I
yeah.
I was taught by bone rollers, people that, you know,
Yep.
that people, you hear people whisper about them when they walked around. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Here comes so and so, and those were the people that were my instructors. You know, Keith C. and Kemple. They talk about him now, what he
Yeah.
did, how he was, and Paturel, Richard Sealand, all those, and my professors in France, and I was very blessed to be taught that way. And I'm not saying that this is to go out there and beat people up. No, I came from that arena. You know, I came from that arena you know, my dad's brother was the one that taught me, and he taught me because I got my butt whipped when I was 6, and he took him over there, and he used to say, "Cipotas for the street and boxing's for the ring." And they used to tell me, "You get your ass kicked in the street, you're going to get worse when you get home."
Yeah.
And you know, that's a type of upbringing that I had. You know, I was more afraid of my uncles and my father than, and hearing the stories of my uncles, the way they were and the way they acted, and you're like, okay, you know. So street fighting was things that occurred. Okay, it occurs all the time. You know, I learned how to deal with bullies, and you know, the best way, and I keep telling people, the best way to deal with a bully is a right cross in the middle of the mouth. That's going to end the story.
Yep.
And if he beats you up, he's going to respect you. And if he doesn't, he's going to respect you. And I guarantee you that the remainder of the kids that are around there are going to respect you as well. So, you know, and I'm not condoning fighting. I'm not telling people to go out there and fight, but I also do not condone cowardice.
Right.
Cowardness is something that should not be. And it's kind of hard, you know, when you grow up in that element. But like you, being from the street, you know, you grow up in the streets, you end up fighting in the streets and in several different streets. You know, I lived all over the place, and you start seeing that some people will use you. Hey, let's go out, have a beer or something, and they're the troublemakers, and you end up defending that guy because he couldn't fight his way out of a wet paper bag. You know what I'm saying? And you end up being the person that's ending up getting into fights. And so I guess that type of experiences that I have, that's what I try to resonate with some of the younger guys that are around. Hey, don't get used. Only because you're training, people are going to tell you, hey, let's go have a couple of cold ones or what have you. And guess what? They're going to use you because
Yeah.
they can't fight. And,
When
you
I
know.
started dating my wife, I stopped hanging out on the streets because, well, she was a lot better looking than my friends were. So I started hanging with her more. And
Sure.
I would be sitting at the kitchen eating something, both of my wife and I, well, she was my girlfriend then, and there'd be a bang at my door, and I would open up the door. My buddies would be like, "We need you." So I can tell you, she could tell you too, how many times they come knocking at the door and I'd have to walk her home and then go with them to a fight because they're going to get into a fight with a group of other guys and they would always come get me and I would go with them. I just reconnected with my nephew from Boston, Ricky, who he knows how to throw hands. He's a licensed boxing coach. And so he was writing on Facebook, Uncle Peter, I remember when people used to knock on the door and there'd be one or two people and they'd say, come on, let's go out back and spar, because they heard about me. But he said, really, they weren't sparring. They meant they wanted to fight you, but it was a nice way to say, let's go fight. So I would agree with them and he would go watch me do this. And sometimes I'd fight two people at the same time and he couldn't believe how fast I'd dispose of them. And I totally forgot all about that. And he revived that memory talking about it on Facebook. And he says, I can't believe how many times people came looking for you, knocking at your door saying, let's go out back and spar. There was an alley behind my house and there'd be broken glass. There'd be, rocks and dog shit and garbage. And we were fighting. Well, it would start off as a sparring match, but it would turn into a real fight. And I remember one guy, I was out back teaching two of the neighborhood kids how to box, but I was going to, plus show them how to do low kicks and how to get away from bear hugs and things. But we have boxing gloves on and I'm just showing them how to throw hands, how to do different things with just boxing. And this Spanish guy with two of his buddies comes up and they're watching. And the Spanish guy starts talking shit. That's not how you do this. That's not. So I look at him and I'm like, I'm just coaching beginners here. He says, man, I'd kick your ass in a heartbeat. So I had one of the beginners take the gloves off and give it to him. I said, go for it. So he puts the gloves on. I got the gloves on. I got two beginners from the neighborhood watching that I was coaching. He has his two buddies who look like tough. You could tell these kids, they were street guys, right? We start boxing. He starts throwing punches. And all I do is I move my head and it like clips me in the air. Then he throws and I move it this way, clips me in the air. I wasn't afraid, because I've been in so many fights. I could see it coming. I knew the angles and I could just go like that and it would go by me, or I would parry. And all of a sudden I set him up. I hit him with two jabs, a right cross and a hook and broke his jaw. His jaw actually unhinged. He threw the gloves down, grabbed his face and ran. And his two friends are looking at me. And I said, pick up the gloves. Come on, we can play. And they both ran. I saw him about a week or two later. He had they said they wired his jaw and he had to eat through a straw or something. And he was telling me, you broke my jaw, man. I said, okay. I said, where's the gloves? You want a second try? And after that, we became friends. But that's how things were. I've been in so many fights. I wasn't afraid to fight. I really didn't want to, but I met some of my best friends that way. They come up and they want to fight. And I'm like, I don't want to fight you. And then they start throwing punches and kicking. And I just respond. And then after the ass whooping they take, then they tell me, hey, what's your name? And then we become friends, But today, I'll tell you, and then it got to the point where you couldn't do that anymore because somebody would try to knife you.
Absolutely.
Then people, so it's, things have changed.
You had that here. You had people with, Laredo, as you saw when you came down here.
Yeah.
the vast majority of men here carry a knife on their side.
Yeah.
And as soon as they have some alcohol, those knives come out. People say, "Oh, we don't live in a bladed society." Just look around you. Everybody has a
Everybody has a knife. I go to Home Depot. Everybody has a knife clip in their pocket. You go to supermarket, and well, they also have guns too, because they open carry here. They'll carry. It's funny.
You know, and I tell people, and people always come up with that idea, and they always say, "Well, you know, you can't bring a gun to a knife fight." We're not talking about that. We're talking about when the time frame you could not carry a gun
Right.
legally. People would pull open their knives, you know, from straight razors to buck knives. I mean, I saw it all. You know, talking about people coming to the door, I remember that brought back a story. A friend of mine that's he's a public official, and I won't mention his name because he's still sitting there. You know, I ran into him over the COVID, and we sat down, and he goes, "You know what I remember, Paul? I remember when we graduated. You know, we went over to your house to pick you up because these guys were after me. They were going to beat me up, and we brought you along, and you talked to you knew the other guys, you know, and we went behind the mall because behind the mall was just a wooded area. You know, now it's all developed."
Yeah.
And he said, "And you guys were sitting down there, and you guys were shaking hands like it's nothing." And he said, and all of a sudden he said, "Okay, what was this about?" "Oh, it's because so-and-so called so-and-so's girlfriend this and this. You know what? Are you guys going to fight about that? It's only going to be you two." And we kind of just looked around. Nothing ever happened, and we walked away. And I go, that's what happens. You know,
Yeah.
you meet people, especially in the young days. Sometimes your best friends are the ones you ended up fighting.
Yeah.
Every day, you know, you see them, you hug them, and those are the guys that you know follow you around. And they're friends, you know, you become friends. And there's some others that not, and they will never be. But that's just the way it is. People need to understand that, especially martial artists today. And I say this, Peter, and I say this with the utmost sincerity, because there's a lot of good martial artists out there. There's a lot of great teachers out there teaching. And I don't care what style it is. There's some people out there with good intention, with good experiences that can make the person better. And I tell folks, you know, they call me and goes, "How would I know if I go check out the other schools?" I go, ask them the question, "Have you ever used this? When was the last time?" Ask the instructor, "Have you ever used this in the street?" You're supposed to be teaching people how to defend themselves in the street. Tell them, "Have you ever used this in the street?"
Yeah.
They kind of turn around and they start giving you this mumbo jumbo about spirits and harmony and this. Walk out. Leave. Leave.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Get out of there. It's a carnival trick. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. What happened up here, I was teaching, you know, throughout the years, I was teaching these people from New Hampshire. I love the people from New Hampshire. One thing about up here is every neighbor helps out the other neighbor.
Sure.
That's what I love. I've never experienced this before. If a tree falls in your yard, everybody comes and people you don't even know show up with chainsaws and help you out. But everybody helps out everybody. There was something I was going to say. I kind of lost my train of thought there. You know, since I moved up here, here it is. It came back. I was teaching these people and I'm telling them things that can happen to them. You know, a person can do this, can do that, can stab you. They wouldn't believe me. They're like, "No, nobody would do that." I'm like, "Dude, they did it to me. I got stabbed in my side. I got shot in my leg, whacked with a bat in the eye. And no, nobody would do that." I'm like, wake up. Now they're starting to wake up because they're actually seeing it, you know? But when you're trying to teach them, I've had guys that own their own schools, and then they would come to me and they act humble, but then when I'm showing them stuff, they're doubting what I'm showing them, and they're like, "Oh, that wouldn't work." Dude, I used that in a real fight. What are you talking about? This works. Most important thing I can tell somebody is, one, develop your ability to see an angle and know your distance between another human being. If they start closing the distance, create more distance if you don't want to fight. The next thing is use your eyes to be able to read body language. Today they call it body language reading, behavior profiling. facial reading, things like that. Back then we called it sizing someone up.
Absolutely.
I didn't know it was called that.
You size somebody up. You were sizing
Right.
them up. And you know exactly by the walk, by what
Yeah,
they're wearing, what can you do? You know, you might have a very powerful kick, but if the guy's having a leather jacket that's loose, I guarantee you he's not going to do anything.
yeah, yeah.
I
That's what,
guarantee you might have the best cold steel knife or the best knife that money can buy. And if he's wearing a leather jacket and you try to cut that leather, it ain't going to happen.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And people say, no, it's not. Okay.
Well, that's because they haven't experienced it themselves. And that's why I tell everybody now that comes into my dojo or into my dojo garage, whatever you want to call it, everything I'm about to show you is total bullshit. It's all crap. Because in reality, it's all theory. I can't teach you to fight. I can show you how to prepare for a fight. The fighting comes from you. So everything is bullshit because everything I'm going to teach is in theory until you absorb the knowledge, you understand it for yourself, and you can make it work, then it's no longer bullshit. Until then, it's bullshit. And I've had people come in and tell me, wow, I never heard a martial arts teacher say that. And I'm saying, well, I'm being honest.
It's the way it is. You know, those are, you know, you start paying attention to those that live longer. You start paying attention to those that, you know, back then, you know, and people tell me this, oh, my father took me to, or my uncle or my father, it was always a man figure, took me to the martial arts school because they knew this guy could fight. They knew this guy could fight.
Right.
Now you have moms taking the kids to the martial arts school because it's right next to their nail salon. They don't know who's teaching, you know, and they walk in there and there's a 23-year-old kid, I'm Grandmaster and does this. I tell people that as well. If you go into somebody's school and the guy comes up and he goes, I'm Grandmaster so-and-so, walk out.
Yeah.
Walk out.
Yeah.
If the person cannot say, I'm Paul Buitron, or here, how you doing? My name's Paul Buitrón. You know, that's the way it is. I've never met doctors unless they had it right here in Dr. So-and-so. They don't come up to you, the true doctors don't come up to you and say, I'm Dr. So-and-so. How you doing today? You know, they'll tell you their last name or their first name. You're reading the doctor here anyway. You know what I'm saying? So you have to understand where it's at. You introduce others as Grandmaster. You introduce others as this. That title is there. They're coming into the school. They know what you're doing. Understand what I'm saying? There's many different martial arts. There's different formats of what it is. But people need to pay attention to those little red flags.
Yeah.
Those, you know, especially those chop and block schools. And we make fun of them.
Yep.
And I know those people are struggling to make money, but those schools are you know, they have to continue being open. I send people that way. You know, the other day they brought me a 2-year-old and the guy got mad at me.
Yeah.
And he came in and he goes, you know, and was carrying a baby. You know, he was in diapers. You can tell the kid was in diapers. And he starts telling me he was about 2 years old in diapers, maybe not even 3 years old. And he starts telling me how he wrestles with his son, and his son watches UFC and he kicks and he punches and he wrestles with his son. And I said, well, bring him in. Let me take a look at your son, bring him in. And he goes, he's right here. And I go, are you serious? I mean, the kid's in diapers. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? And he goes, oh, you're making fun of me. And I go, no, but I'll send you to a school that teaches little guys.
Yeah.
Here's a number. Tell them I send you. Go. You
Yeah,
know?
I had
you know,
somebody,
I'm sorry.
yeah, I had somebody come in and I was talking to them and they heard all about me and, you know, my name keeps coming up in circles. See, I'm not a commercial school. I have no sign out front. People, they have to call me. I have business cards. There's no address on the card. So they got to call me and talk to me before I even meet with them. And then when I meet with them, they ask me, what do I call you? I said, what do you mean, what do you call me? Yeah, I said, call me by my name, Peter. As long as you don't call me a clown, we're good, you know? So they were like, oh, shouldn't I call you Grandmaster? I said, no. My teacher, Mr. Brewster, was a Grandmaster. And he said, if you call me Grandmaster, I'll punch you in the face. Don't ever call me that. That might be a title, but don't let it go to your head. It doesn't mean anything. I'm a human being. I've been training for X amount of years. I made other gurus, and so he called himself Guru Grandi, right? Instead of Grandmaster, he'd be like Big Guru, right? And he would get mad if you introduced him as Grandmaster Brewster. You know, he would like to be called Mr. Brewster or, you know, or George Brewster, but he didn't like that. He wasn't into the titles or the labels. He was into what can you do?
Sure.
He would always say to me, okay, this guy teaches that guy teaches this, but can they fight? Okay. He would always say, okay, Pete, you're doing this, but can you fight? If you can't fight, then what you're teaching isn't worthy. You have to be able to fight, and you have to be able to back it up. And I think that's why he made me Grandmaster, because every time he went around to places, he would always bring me, and there was always, what do you call it? A sparring match, right? It would just be me and him, or me, him, and a few other students. And he'd say, okay, we're going to visit this other Arnis group, or this Kylie group, or Screamer group, whatever. And they were all nice. But then they would put up their fighter, and they'd say, okay, Pete, I want you to spar him. And then I'd started to realize he was bringing me along to school people. And then if he wanted me to beat the shit out of the guy, he would whisper in my ear, school him. And then, you know, we'd take it a little harder, a little faster, a little, do whatever it was, you know, hit the guy's hand or hit him in the kneecap, you know, or do something. But I was a person, if they hit me, I got angry and I would fight harder. And I think that's from growing up, getting into fights all the time. So then when I would get into stick matches, when Mr. Brewster would bring me and say, okay, you're going to spar this guy. First, I thought we were going to watch. Next thing I know, Mr. Brewster is running the class. I said, wait, I thought we were watching. Well, don't worry, I'm running the class. And then all of a sudden it'd be sparring. And after 10 times, I figured it out. We're going to fight. We're not going to spar. He would warm everyone up. I don't forget the day. I'm not going to mention the name. He took me to a school, and it was, I'm not going to mention where it was because people watching this will know. And it's kind of funny because I went with him. It was just me and him. We drove to a certain neighborhood where my shade of skin wasn't allowed in Boston. And we went into this, and we were training this group. And then finally, I think there must have been about 10 or 15 students. It was another Filipino martial art group. And he says, Pete, I want you to spar every one of them. And I said, okay, Mr. Brewster, no problem. And then he says, school them. And I went, oh, shit. So it's just me and him with this other group. And now my heart's racing because I'm like, I'm going to get my ass kicked. Some of these guys, I had to look up. They were like big dudes. So I went out and I was sparring them. I would spar one at a time until the guy got exhausted and couldn't continue. We'd bow out and I'd spar the next guy. Now I'm not getting rest. I'm sparring fresh people, one right after another. And some of these guys are seasoned street fighters. You know what I mean? I mean, you could see it. They had it all over their body, the way they walked, and they didn't give up. But I would spar them because I love to fight. Well, I don't like to fight, but when I was in it, I like to fight once it starts. And we were going. Finally, when I got to the end guy, it was over. I went to pack up and put stuff away. In the beginning, none of these guys would shake my hand when Mr. Brewster introduced me to them. And then at the end, they all came over and shook my hand at the end. And Mr. Brewster would always do things like that to me. He would take me places. And I think because of the way I could teach and explain things, but yet I can back it up, I think that's why he made me Grandmaster of his system. He promoted me in 2000, he promoted me to Guru Director. And I asked him, what is Guru Director? And he said, that means you have permission to open a school. After he died in 2006, 6 years after he promoted me to Guru Director, a lot of gurus started calling me and asking me what was on my certificate. And I told them Guru Director. And then I went, because I didn't even know what it meant. I thought it just meant permission. And what they were doing was learning to take over the system. I figured it out after. Mr. Brewster gave us a sheet of paper of rank, and it told you what each thing meant. Guru Director was at the very bottom. and it said there can only be one guru director. That's Grandmaster. So when he handed me that, I didn't look at that rank thing because I didn't care about it, right? I didn't realize he made me Grandmaster in 2000 of his system. And then for 6 years, he kept telling me a good Grandmaster does this, a good Grandmaster does this, a good Grandmaster sets the proper example for his students and the public, and a good Grandmaster watches out for his neighborhood. And I'm like, why does he keep telling me all this? So I'm thinking he's talking about himself, and I'm thinking, why does he have to say that? I already know that about Mr. Brewster, right? He's a good man. He's knowledgeable. A good Grandmaster constantly keeps learning. He doesn't accept what he has. He wants to learn more to further his knowledge to make his art better. In 2006, when Mr. B passed away, for 6 years, he kept coaching me and telling me things like that, all these different things. And in 2006, when he passed away, about a month or two later, it hit me. And it hit me after all these other gurus were calling me and asking me my rank. And then it started, he was coaching me for 6 years how to be a Grandmaster. And he didn't tell me I was a Grandmaster, because if he did, I would have got upset because I didn't want to be. Because I had my own thing. I had the Freedman's method that I was developing. And I was teaching Ketsugo Jiu-Jitsu, and I was developing my own teaching method to teach the Jiu-Jitsu better to anybody. And everybody goes after. I noticed growing up in martial arts schools that I went to, the senseis were always proud of their big, tough students that could beat the crap out of everybody. And they always didn't care for their less shy students. So go ahead.
You're absolutely correct with that. And I see that. And I also see, with a lot of, and I would see this a lot with, this is my number one. This is my number one. This is a favorite. You can't have a favorite.
Right.
You can't have a favorite. You can't have a number one. You can't have, because they're all your students.
Yeah, they're all
the day you say this one here is this,
yeah,
people are going to hate you one way or another, going to talk bad about you and so forth. So I've learned that from others, seeing that as in the martial arts, seeing it and how it went. I've learned not to do that. You know what I'm concerned more about now, Peter?
What?
I'm concerned that my little guys do great in school.
Yeah.
I'm concerned that my little guys, if they need be, God forbid that they have to use it, and to produce better citizens in our society.
Yeah.
That's what I want to. You know what? I want these kids to look at somebody and shake their hand and look at them straight in the eye. You don't see that anymore.
Adults don't do that.
And they shake their hands and they're doing this, No, look at somebody in the eye when you shake their hand. You're going to grow up to be a man, and you have to be that way.
In my adult class, the adults look past you and they stick their hand out. I'm like, hey, I'm over here. Look me in the eye when I shake your hand after every class.
Absolutely.
Now we fist bump thing because everyone's afraid to shake hands. Now, some of my students, I got an ex-Marine. He's 62 years old. You'd love this guy. Real badass. Real funny bastard. You'd absolutely love this guy. He comes over and he goes and gives me a big hug. He's strong as a bull. His hands are 2 times the size of my hand. And he comes over and he goes, give me the Corona hug. And he gives me like the COVID-19, gives me a big hug. He laughs at all this shit. It's
let me put it to you this way. The virus is real, but so is the scam.
Yeah. It's a pandemic. That's what it is, a pandemic.
And unfortunately, it's going to get worse. Believe me, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. They figured out the way how to shut down people and the mass numbers, and that's what they're doing.
I went into the restaurant. I went into a restaurant to do a takeout order, right, in Concord, New Hampshire. It was Uno's. And I go in the restaurant, and the lady tells me, it's at night. There's hardly anyone in the restaurant. She says, you're going to have to leave. You have to come in with a mask on. I said, I just want to place a takeout order, and then I'll wait in the car. And she goes, no, you're not allowed in here. You have to leave. You need a mask in order to walk through the door. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, I'll go get it. Got my car and drove away. I went to the Chinese restaurant down the street, ordered my food, and that was the end of that. It's getting cuckoo. People are absolutely nuts. I'm glad that the governor of New Hampshire, Governor Sununu, he took out the mandate, so it's not mandatory to wear a mask now. A lot of stores still require it, but it's not mandated.
It's a lot of stores require it, and I'll have it in my pocket. I'll go inside, put it on, and leave outside. I was, the other day I was walking out, and I was walking out of the store, and somebody else was right behind me walking out, and I took my mask off, and the other older gentleman took his mask off, and these two started telling him to put his mask back on. And I kind of said, "Hey, buddy, no, you don't. It's inside the store. We're outside." They started arguing about property and all this. And I told them, "Listen, you know what? If you're going to go inside, go buy stuff." And I waited because he was an elderly gent. And I waited for him to get in the store. And he kind of just gave me a thumbs up and walk off. But, we have to stop this nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
I grew up that if somebody came at you with a mask, they were going to rob you.
Yeah, me too. I never thought that you go back then. You couldn't go in. You couldn't go into a bank with a mask and a gun on your hip. Today we're wearing masks, hats, sunglasses with a gun on your hip, and you're going into the bank to do make a deposit or a withdrawal, and it's like no big deal. Before COVID, if you did that, you'd get arrested. It's kind of funny how people are accepting the craziness that they're promoting in the media. Absolutely.
Well, I want to wish you the best this year. We're going to talk again probably sometime in August, kind of figure out where everybody's at.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for the stories and for the counsel, because people might look at this and listen and say, "Oh, there's a bunch of guys just talking, rambling on." It's not rambling. You're talking about experiences, and start learning from them for you not to make mistakes. Believe me, I've made mistakes in the martial arts. I've made mistakes in the business. I've made mistakes, and I learned from them and continue trying to clear them up and move forward. And there's things that I did that I did not want to do because I didn't want to cross that line to become a McDojo.
Yeah.
Okay. So I've left people there. So so it's a choice that I've made, and things like that happen. But again, Peter, I want to thank you for continuing to push on true martial arts in your area. And we will get together soon. Hopefully we can get this pandemic out and see how the operations go through. And
I had a good time. I had a good time when I was in Laredo with you. And I want to thank you and your family for accepting me, feeding me, driving me around, the jokes, the laughter, the handshakes, the hugs. It was all great. I absolutely love your kids, by the way. I think they're awesome. You did a good job with your kids. Your wife is amazing. I didn't do any capoeira when I was capoeira scares me a little bit. I'm afraid I might go to do a cartwheel and throw something out. But I absolutely love the savate. I love the stick work you were showing me. I totally forgot it because I didn't practice it enough. But when I come out there, I want to focus on your stick work. I'd like to learn that. You had the longer stick and you were doing the double.
Sure.
Absolutely love your stick work. I've never seen anything like it. And I've been doing Filipino martial arts since the 1980s. And the way you use your sticks in the savate is I love it. I absolutely love it. So I definitely would have, the next time I come out, I want to spend a lot of time on that. If there's anything that I have that I can share with you, I'd be happy to do that.
We'll do that. We'll have some good times. We'll get together. Once more, my brother, you be safe. And folks out there, you guys stay safe and stay away from the craziness.
I'll do my best.
Always. Peace.
Take care, brother.
Today, in America, more than 5.5 million men, women, and children train in a martial art regularly. Buitron Academy has been serving Laredo for over 30 years now. Our adult classes are geared for producing the best in you, teaching you street-ready techniques. With the arts of savate and kinpo, you'll learn the traditions of these sciences of combat, as passed down professor to student.
Bonjour, friends of Professor Buitrón. The COVID-19 scare is almost over. Be sure to bring the kids back to the professor's training and help them build their bodies, self-respect, self-confidence, and self-defense. The professor is a very competent and amazing man of several talents, aside from being a lovable teddy bear and a funny man. Get back to the studios. This is Sam Booth calling from Phoenix, Arizona. Have a great training. Bye for now.
Hello, my name is Manuel Lozano. I've been trained in the martial arts for close to 50 years. I trained in many martial arts from different masters and grandmasters throughout the years, from the 70s all the way to now. I've known Professor Buitrón for about 30 years. He has done the same, trained in many different arts with many masters. He's traveled all over France, studying with surviving Savate grandmasters, did his research. This man not just knows the fighting techniques and the art, but the philosophy, the history and the strategy, and applying this arts combined with all the other arts. So this man is a wealth of knowledge for anyone seeking instruction in real martial arts and street martial arts. This is the school to go to in Laredo, Texas. For those of you who are away from Laredo, this is the guy to look for. Okay, he's very well versed in all the fighting styles of the different arts he is trained in, and I would highly recommend the school.
Hi, this is Mike Blackery from San Antonio, Texas, home of CMOC and the Wing Chun Boxing Academy. I'm here to tell you about my good friend Paul Buitron. He is reopening his school in Laredo, Texas. Paul is a wealth of knowledge. I've known him a long time. I highly suggest everybody in that area get with it. Go down there and train. Times are getting tough here. And with this COVID-19, we need to support local business. So I highly suggest go see Paul Buitron at the Don Theroux Savate Academy in Laredo, Texas. You will not regret it. Be good.
Come train at the best kept secret of Laredo. Give us a call for your free evaluation at 956-401-4868 or check out our website at savate.biz. Follow us on YouTube and Facebook.